Hey, I'm Dave Bennett, and today we're going to make a wet slab bonsai pot using some insulation board and some rolled out slabs that I've got here. Now the advantage to doing that is that we can use a simple wooden rib. Some people I've seen use credit cards that have been shaped, but that's going to form the whole crux of the pot. The slab has been divided into three pieces. This will do the bottom of the pot, this will do the sides of the pot, and this will do the feet and spacers of the pot after we get the whole thing formed. So what I'm going to do first is take this, lay down, this insulation board has been wrapped with butcher paper, which I find holds up a whole lot better than newspaper, because it can be cut later on. That will be in another video about making the form, wrapping the form, and creating the ribs. So the first thing we're going to do is lay this down on the slab and use a fettling knife to cut out the shape. Okay, now that I have the slab for the bottom trimmed off, we're going to flip this thing over so that we can put the sides on. Now they're going to be flipped onto a bat that is made out of MDF board. These are 3/4 of an inch thick, but they've been treated with a marine epoxy, one coat. And what that does, it allows, it doesn't allow it to have absorb moisture as we work the clay and use water as a lubricant. So I have 2 holes drilled into it that is going to screw down to the form once we have the sides put on. But so in order to flip this thing over, instead of trying to pick the slabs up, we're just going to put the 2 things together, turn it over, and remove the newspaper. The sides, I wanted to show you that I use that same insulation board for the bats around here. They're very light and don't take up a lot of space. So the reason for flipping that is that you really try not to handle the slabs very much, simply because you don't want to deform them. So it's a nice way to get started. So now we're going to put the sides on. So now we're getting ready to put the sides of the pot on. You can see that I have this scored. Now these slabs have just come off the slab roller. They're very soft. Some people may not think that you need to actually score this. I found that it does make a little bit better bond. In fact, I will put some slip on there, not a lot, but it just seems like it sticks a bit better. But one thing that we have to determine is how wide to make these pieces that are going to be on the side. This is the rib, and you can see this part of the rib is going to ride on the foam as we go around to put in the detail of the lip and the banding around the bottom. Now here you can see, if you put a ruler on there, that's just about 2 inches. So we're going to cut some 2-inch slabs that are going to go around it. Now, here is a way, I'm going to cut a slab that goes from these two corners as well as the side, which is going to be around, let's see, about 16 inches, a little more than 16 inches.
And, yeah. So, 2 inch. 2 inch.
And I'm also going to score the top edge, which is going to mate up with the bottom of the bottom slab. All right, so we're just going to give it a little bit of slip. Don't need a lot. It does seem to help it stick better. We're just going around this thing and the two corners. And then we'll put a little bit on here. And now, in order to keep this elevated, so we don't have to scrape off that excess clay, I'm going to put some little spacers that's the same width as that. All right. Okay, so here we have the two sides been put on as well as the end, and I'll show you how. I'm just going to slice down on here using the pot or the foam plug as a guide. And these spacers keep the slab from tearing out on the bottom. And then we're just going to score it up and slip a little bit, don't need a lot. And I've done this both ways. I've put these together without slip as well, without a problem. I just find that it sticks a little better as you're scraping off the excess with the rib a little bit later on. So here we have the end cap. Put it on there. And then we can just take the little fiddling knife and cut the excess away. All right. Okay, so now that we have the sides all put together, we're going to have to put on a little extra clay to accommodate for the lip up at the top of the pot. Now I have a ruler on there, and it shows that that's just a shy of 1/4 of an inch. So what I've done is I've cut a little strip from the same slab that's 1/4 of an inch wide. The way we're going to attach it though is we're not going to use a lot of water, just like a slip, but I'm going to just use a toothbrush that's wet and just kind of just moisten it up a bit. This one I'm not going to, measure the length. I'm going to use the full length of the slab so that we don't have to use as many. And the same little spacers. We're going to hold it flat. Okay, we're going to put the last one in. I want you to notice that the joints that I put to join them together is always cut on an angle. And the reason for that is that as you keep going around with the rib, it's going to compress that joint together. Using a butt joint here is not a good thing. This will give you much more surface area. In the boat building business, we call this a scarf joint. So, going around. And here, you can see, you know, I've just made a continuation of that surface. And we can just kind of come around and put that together. Make sure we have something supporting it to make the cut. And now we got all of the clay onto the piece. And now we're going to prepare it to use the rib. So for that, we're going to take and cut off this excess from the top with a fettling knife. You know, the reason there's a little bit extra there, you don't want to be short here, so I always err on the side of caution. But I'm taking a fettling knife with, I don't know if you noticed, but a fettling knife it's a single bevel. So that bevel is going to be up, and so that's going to separate, and we're just going to ride the bottom slab to trim that off. Nice and flush. Okay. So now that we got all of the clay on, I'm going to go around here with a hard rib and just kind of get everything compressed onto the mold, the styrofoam form. And it's going to compress all of those joints tightly and just kind of get us set up so that we can flip this thing over and remove the paper, part of the paper. But getting this kind of pushed down tight. It'll help it staying in place when we start actually using the wooden molding rib. Okay, so now we're going to go around here and kind of mark where the top of the pot is going to be, and we're going to do that using this rib. And in order for it to kind of float easily across here, we want to lube it up. So you want to get this thing nice and wet. And I'm just going to stick it under there, and you can kind of see how this rib is actually starting to form the lip on the top side of the pot. Now you don't want to really try taking a lot of clay off of here at one time because it will tear. So you just want to kind of go at it in a very judicious manner. Right now, the only thing we want to do is mark where the top of the pot is. Okay. All right, we've kind of gone around here and kind of compressed everything together. You can see that that lip has just kind of been pushed on there. It hasn't really been finished yet. But what we need to do now is get the paper off of the form so that the rib can ride on there without tearing the paper off. So what we're going to do is flip the pot over, and I'm going to use newspaper always to keep the rib, or from the bottom, from sticking to the bat. And get a foam bat. And now we're going to flip the whole thing over. So we have all of this paper that has been taped onto the foam. Now we're going to get rid of that. And I'm going to use a knife, but it's a very sharp knife, an X-Acto knife. And you're just going to cut right into the foam. You're going to kind of use that as a guide. You don't really want to tear the paper as much as cutting it. And there is a direction to this, and that is from the way that you folded the paper up on top of the plug, which we'll go over next time in how to make a plug and wrap it. Some people have suggested using saran wrap for this, or dry cleaner bags. I haven't tried it, but the only thing that I would sort of worry about is the plastic not tearing and with the rib and kind of making a wrinkled mess on the inside. But it might be something that you want to try. Okay, now we got to cut the whole way around. I can show you how this rib is going to ride on the foam plug. Now this styrofoam insulation board actually has a piece of packing tape that runs around the whole thing, which keeps the foam from tearing as we go around here. So all we got to do now is take this paper off. Yeah, I don't think we need to see the rest of the paper. Okay, now that we got all of the paper taken off of there, we're going to put our bat back on the top of this. So in order to keep this from sliding around as we're running the rib around it, we're going to put a couple of screws into the foam. And we just want to make sure that the pot is centered up on the bat as well as we can. And these are just a couple of common drywall screws that have been... Got that here. And go again. Flipped over. And now we're ready to use the rib in earnest. Okay, now we got everything screwed down, held in place. We're going to start scraping off. Now, to do this, with it, the clay wants to stretch from the friction of pulling it. So you really want to work from the corner, and you want to work in to the center, and then come around to the other side. And yes, you have to become ambidextrous, to use both hands. But it's really pretty important that you do that. And this scraping of the pot down is where probably the biggest learning curve of the process is, and just getting a feel for it, and how much clay you can take off at once without tearing the detail that you have in it. Keep your rib lubed up and work from the corners to the middle. I'm not taking a lot of clay at once, as you can see. You just keep working it down until the rib is actually riding on the form. That way you know you have a consistent wall thickness. It's the same way the whole way around. So here's an example of trying to take too much at one time. You see how the lip starts to tear. Now this is a pretty groggy mix, which tears a little bit easier, but it's much more stable for warping and drying. But in order to take that out, it's really not to be worried about too much, because you just come from the other direction with a lubed up rib. You can see how the bead's starting to form on the lower portion of the pot, which means we're getting closer to having all of the clay scraped off. Okay, now that we're a little further along in getting the excess clay scraped off, and we're getting down to the finer points, it's really important to understand that this rib has got to stay at 90 degrees to the surface of the pot, so you don't change the geometry of that profile. You can see as you rotate that, the profile actually changes. Okay? The other thing that's important is, like, when you come off of your pole, that you keep the rib on the back, because you will tear up the top of the pot if you don't. And it's hard not to do that. And when we flip this thing over, I'll probably show you a few of what it looks like. You try to minimize that. It's almost impossible to eliminate it. But now we're going to work the corner a little bit. And this is it's a hollow corner. It's actually a concave curve. And it's kind of nice to keep the butter on the rib, because that will fill in some of the loose spaces as you go around. go with me to remove this. And you can see I'm changing directions back to work into the center of the pot. So here's a place that I'm kind of missing some clay right here on that bead, and I'm just going to put some in the place to and this can happen if you like tear the lip, or you take a little bit too much off. You can replace it, and just kind of push it into place.
Where you made a divot?
Yeah. Where did I? Yeah, if you make a divot. Oh, there's one right there. There's one right here. No. But it's easily repaired. And the rib, you don't want to take it all at once, but the rib will just kind of fix it. So in the course of compressing the sides of the slab and you can see that where the bottom and the sides join, it kind of pushes the clay up. And what we're going to do is just go around there, and I'm using a toothed rib to remove that. And you go a little bit at a time. But you want to make sure that the whole thing is level with the bottom of the pot. And you can see I'm putting teeth marks in, but those are going to be taken out with, got a yellow rib here. You can see that it's starting to roll the side of the pot over, and we're going to use the rib, the wooden rib, to clean those off. So you kind of work between the two, going back and forth until everything is removed and you have a crisp, clean corner. There we go, we're taking off that edge. You can see that it's raising back up to the top side. But we'll just go back and do the same thing again until all that excess clay is gone. So now that we got our form, it's pretty much most of the excess clay has been removed, and we really want to try to get the smoothest finish on the outside of the pot. And to do that, we're going to make sure it's lubed up again, and we're just going to go around all in one direction. There's not a lot of friction since most of the clay has been removed, so the corners aren't trying to stretch. And you're really not pushing very hard now as well. But you gotta make sure. The other thing of keeping going around in a circle is that you're not having to lift the rib up. You want to keep it on the surface. You want to come out on a corner like so. But here's where you can leave a lot more of the clay on there. It'll form like a butter, and it'll fill in some of the places that might have torn or just aren't smooth, and fill in where some of the grog might be. And you can actually tilt it a little bit off of 90 degrees. That will also keep things running a little bit more smoothly. Here's a little divot there. Kind of fill that right in. Another one here. Might want to re-wet it. Tell you what we might do. Let's see if this works. So you can see now we've got pretty much the whole shape. We still have some little rough edges on that corner. It's probably best not to really mess with that a lot until the clay has a chance to firm up, which will, this is actually, we're going to put the feet on it next and flip it over and pull the plug, and then tomorrow a lot of this stuff will be addressed when the clay is much more firm and harder to deform.